said that nothing can hide the sun forever. Yet there are truths about US-China cooperation that the world's #1 superpower has buried so deeply that they seem to never be mentioned again. These are stories that stunned the entire world. The earth-shattering secrets that this country determined to lock behind the doors of power. Throughout modern history, the US often sees itself as the world's savior. But every glory has its dark side. Alongside heroic historical pages are hidden dark chapters, incidents that Washington considers taboo to mention. So what are the earth-shattering secrets that America doesn't want the world to know? Let's explore together in today. Operation Paperclip, when America rescued Nazi German soldiers. During World War II, leaders in Washington realized that the value wasn't in the weapons arsenal left behind in Germany, but in the scientists who created them. Therefore, immediately after the war ended, they launched a secret campaign called Operation Paperclip. Translated as Operation Paperclip, with the goal of recruiting thousands of Nazi and engineers to serve the country's military and space programs. Despite many of them having directly participated in military activities or controversial medical research under Hitler's regime, an estimated over 1,500 scientists from Germany and Austria were brought to. Among them were prominent figures like Wernher von Braun, Ludwig Roth and Arthur Rudolph, as well as many who had participated in developing the V-2 rocket, served in the SS or directly managed slave labor camps. More importantly, to cover up their pasts, the Washington government modified records and marked them separately by paper-clipping priority documents, and from that detail, the name Operation Paperclip was born. Over time, these scientists gradually became American citizens and held important roles in missile, weapons, and space technology development programs. Notably, Wernher von Braun became NASA's chief architect, contributing to the resounding success of Apollo 11, despite previously being an SS officer and V-2 rocket design engineer, as well as having recruited forced labor from Buchenwald concentration camp, according to declassified documents released later. Overlooking the controversial pasts of these scientists, the US government still prioritized benefits and kept Operation Paperclip secret for many years. However, the concealment gradually collapsed as documents were declassified. Then journalists and scholars began accessing archival records, as well as witness testimonies. Finally, the Ozenberg list was made public, thereby exposing direct connection between many scientists and the Nazi regime in the past. X-37B is a space warship. Among America's top secret military programs, the X-37B space orbital test is considered one of the biggest mysteries of modern aerospace. Developed for NASA's X-37 project and manufactured by Boeing, the X-37B is an unmanned autonomous spacecraft that can launch like a rocket, operate in orbit for months or years, and then return to Earth like an airplane. Since its first flight in 2010, this spacecraft has completed 7 missions, with the longest lasting up to 2.5 years. But the true purpose of these flights has mostly been kept secret, leaving the public with only scattered information about launch and landing times. This has made the X-37B the focus of many theories. Some analysts believe it simply serves advanced technology research, such as collecting solar energy in orbit, testing plasma engines, or deploying quantum sensor systems and laser communications. However, there are also views that the X-37B was designed with more military purposes, such as monitoring enemy satellites, testing orbital weapons, or preparing for space warfare capabilities. Moreover, the transfer of control over this program, from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency to the Air Force's Rapid Capabilities Office, and then to the US Space Force, further demonstrates its importance in military strategy. Not only that, the deliberate ambiguity from Washington has sparked much controversy, because if the X-37B only serves technology, then maintaining absolute secrecy seems unnecessary. For this reason, observers suspect that the country might be preparing for a scenario of space militarization at a much higher level than what has been publicly disclosed. The plan to assassinate Fidel Castro with an exploding seashell. For decades, Cuban leader Fidel Castro became the target of numerous assassination plots. From the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, they devised plans with diverse methods and levels of sophistication, from poisoned cigars, milkshakes containing poison, to alien sent hidden shoes. One of the strangest conspiracies must be the plan involving explodies. Since the CIA noticed Castro's great fondness for scuba, they planned to place a brightly colored conch shell in his favorite diving area, with explosives hidden inside that would activate when he touched it. However, this plan was quickly abandoned due to its impracticality. Not stopping there, the organization also considered a plot related to a diving suit, where they intended to sprinkle skin disease and tuberculosis bacilli into the aiming to make Castro sick and physically weakened. The agency also sought to connect with American mafia groups to poison him with botulinum toxin. Chicago mafia boss Sam Giancana was even approached, but everything did not proceed as planned. Those poison pills were later tested on guinea pigs. No one is certain to what extent these conspiracies were carried out, but their existence was carefully documented in CIA secret files. It wasn't until 1975 that a secret investigative report partially revealed later nearly 3,000 documents related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy were also declassified by order of President Donald Trump in 2017. They were further corroborated by memoirs of former Cuban security officials, including Fabian Escalante, former intelligence agency leader, who had directly monitored all plots targeting Castro. MK-Ultra program. In the context of the Cold War, CIA deployed a series of top secret aimed at researching human mind control, with code names like Bluebird, Artichoke, and particularly MK-Ultra. The main objectives were to find methods for brainwashing, information, and weakening individual will through the use of hallucinogenic LSD, hypnosis, sensory paralysis, electroshock, as well as many other forms of psychological. However, concerningly, these experiments were often conducted on soldiers, prisoners, mental patients, and even ordinary citizens in the US and Canada, without consent. Later declassified documents show there were about 149 sub-projects, with at least 14 projects definitely involving humans, 6 other projects were human experiments without their knowledge, and 19 projects possibly related to human experimentation. Simultaneously, at least 80 organizations, including many hospitals and research institutes, had unintentionally or intentionally participated. Many victims were subjected to high-dose LSD hallucinogenic testing for consecutive, leading to permanent psychological damage. A typical example is the mysterious death of scientist Frank Olson in 1953. After he was injected with LSD without his knowledge, the incident became the focus of controversy about the program's legality and ethics. Although CIA always justified that they had to stay ahead of the Soviet Union in the field of brain, the illegal and inhumane nature of the project made the agency try every way to conceal it. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of almost all MK-Ultra records to erase all traces. However, information about MK-Ultra began leaking in 1974 when the New York Times published exposés on CIA's unethical experiments, leading to a series of public hearings. Simultaneously, investigations by the Church Committee, Rockefeller, along with documents declassified thanks to the Freedom of Information Act in 1977, continued to unveil the truth. Nevertheless, because most records had been destroyed, the true scale of MK-Ultra remains a mystery to this day, and will probably never be fully disclosed. NSA's silent global surveillance. In June 2013, Edward Snowden, a technology engineer who previously worked at the National Security Agency, abbreviated as NSA, shocked the world by unexpectedly disclosing hundreds of thousands of top-secret documents. These documents were not just a few internal reports, but also clear evidence showing Washington had built a massive surveillance network, silently covering almost all of humanity's digital activities. Snowden revealed that the NSA not only collected communication data of American citizens, but also expanded its scope globally. They secretly intercepted millions of calls, emails, and messages without excluding anyone, from innocent civilians, large corporations to close allies, and even national leaders. One of the most shocking pieces of evidence was the PRISM program, which allowed the organization to infiltrate directly into the server systems of major tech corporations like Google, Facebook, or Microsoft to extract user data without their consent. Not stopping there, this engineer also showed that the surveillance scope far exceeded imagination, with intelligence agencies intercepting messages, recording calls, storing images from webcams, tracking financial transactions, and installing tracking devices on international fiber optic cables and communications. In other words, the NSA's eye almost missed no corner of human life. Before Edward Snowden's revelations, American and global public opinion had been stirred up. Under heavy pressure from public opinion, the Washington administration was forced to partially, while Congress had to adjust to terminate some mass surveillance programs. Many other countries and international organizations quickly tightened personal data protection to prevent big tech companies from aiding espionage activity. On March 16, 1968, amid the tension and hatred of the search and destroy strategy, American soldiers entered My Lai village in Tenki Canyon, Huanggai City, Huanggai Province, and turned the operation into a horrific massacre. The result was 504 innocent civilians, including women, children, the elderly, and even pregnant women, being raped, tortured, and mercilessly killed. The entire village was swept through, houses burned to the ground, livestock slaughtered, leaving an unprecedented scene of devastation. However, what made this tragedy even more shocking was the systematic effort to conceal the truth. After the massacre ended, in reports sent to superiors, the event was codenamed Pinkville and recorded as a successful operation. For nearly 2 years, casualty figures were distorted when innocent civilians were recorded as guerrilla forces to legitimize the mass killings. Many high-ranking officers directly participated in altering records, removing all details about the slaughter of civilians, while on-site photos, testimonies from protesting soldiers, and other objective evidence were classified as top secret. But the truth could not be buried forever. Some veterans spoke out about this crime, notably Ronald Reidenauer. And then a major turning point occurred in 1969, when journalist Seymour Hersh decided to conduct an independent investigation and gathered enough evidence to write a shocking series of reports. Testimonies from protesting soldiers were published in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch in November. In it, he wrote, "At My Lai, the crime was calculatedly planned and executed indifferently, cold-bloodedly." After that, this series quickly created an effect like a bomb exploding right under the world's leading superpower. American society was stunned to realize that the very soldiers praised as symbols of freedom and democracy could act no differently than the German fascists in World War II. Following that was an intense outburst of anger, further spreading the anti-war movement, forcing the Washington administration to no longer remain. Although Lieutenant William Calley was tried and sentenced to death, he only served 3 years of house arrest. This sentence was considered too lenient, causing a severe decline in American public trust in the government and military. The My Lai incident. On August 2, 1964, the destroyer USS Maddox conducted operations about 90 kilometers from our country's coastline, equivalent to 48.6 nautical miles. Therefore, our naval forces carried out legitimate self-defense against blatant American aggression. However, Washington later issued a new statement claiming that the Maddox and USS Turner Joy were attacked again by Vietnamese patrol boats on the night of August 4. The notable point is that this battle never actually occurred. The radar and sonar signals recorded by American sailors were actually just interference caused by bad weather and poor technical equipment. Right at the scene, many American sailors and commanders doubted the accuracy of those signals. But when reports were sent to Washington, they were presented as solid evidence to legitimize plans for war expansion. President Lyndon B. Johnson's administration quickly exploited what they called the second attack to pressure Congress to pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, thereby granting him nearly unlimited authority to. It can be seen that from a non-existent event, America fabricated a pretext to directly send hundreds of thousands of troops to the South. It wasn't until over 4 decades later, when nearly 200 top-secret documents were declassified between 2005 and 2006, that the veil covering the truth was lifted. The August 4th attack was essentially a product of exaggeration, selective editing, and distortion of information. Many reports were intentionally modified to turn false signals into fake evidence to persuade public opinion. Even President Johnson later admitted to close associates that his sailors were just shooting at fish. While CIA Director John McCone affirmed that Vietnam only acted in self-defense when the U.S. continuously attacked islands within its territory. Thus, from a cleverly constructed lie, Washington pushed the war in Vietnam into a more brutal and bloody phase than ever before. The cost was not only millions of civilians and soldiers from both sides falling, but also a war quagmire that left America drained, humiliated, and with an indelible stain in history. Collecting bodies and bones without consent. Launched in 1953, Project Sunshine was conducted by the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and Air Force R&D program to study the effects of radioactive fallout on the world's population. The focus of the project was to measure the global dispersion of strontium-90 isotope, a product of nuclear explosions that accumulates in bones. Particularly dangerous for children because developing bones are more vulnerable. To collect data, scientists took tissue and bone samples from deceased individuals, but most were conducted without consent from relatives. Even in the 1950s, the Washington administration established a secret global network to collect tissues from over 900 corpses without reporting to the families of the deceased. On January 18, 1955, the Atomic Energy Commissioner Dr. Willard Libby frankly admitted that data shortages were due to lack of corpses, especially children. He emphasized that collecting corpses was an important task and those who knew how to do it would serve the country. As a result, over 1,500 samples were collected, with 500 analyzed, including bones of infants and young children from many countries, from Australia to Europe. Furthermore, later investigative evidence revealed the cruelty of the sampling, exemplified by a case in England where doctors amputated the leg of a stillborn child without informing the mother, not even allowing her to dress her son for the funeral. Later, the truth about Project Sunshine only gradually emerged in the mid-1990s when top-secret documents were declassified under the Freedom of Information Act, and international press began exposing the true scale of the project. Under public pressure in 1994, President Bill Clinton was forced to establish the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments to investigate Sunshine along with many other nuclear projects. The final 900-page report confirmed that many activities in this project not only seriously violated medical ethics, but were also illegal, leaving one of the biggest stains in the history of American scientific research during the Cold War. The Watergate Incident. It all began in the early morning of June 17, 1972, when police arrested 5 intruders at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. At first glance, this appeared to be just a simple burglary, but the truth quickly emerged when among those arrested was James McCord, security director of the committee to re-elect the president, along with several former CIA. Later, thanks to the persistence of 2 reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post, along with the secret source Deep Throat, later revealed to the FBI Deputy Director Mark Feld, the public learned that the break-in was just the tip of a large-scale operation. It included phone tapping, money laundering for campaign funds, sabotaging opponents, and above all, systematic cover-up efforts from the White House. Investigative articles also revealed that the Nixon administration not only but also directly directed these illegal activities. For many months, the White House tried to downplay the incident, calling it a third-rate burglary, and strenuously fabricated false. In addition, Nixon ordered investigations to be limited, attempting to control the FBI, simultaneously launching communication campaigns to manipulate. However, when the case was investigated by the Senate, the federal court, and the special prosecutor, the truth was gradually uncovered. The turning point occurred in 1973, when John Dean, former White House advisor, testified that Nixon was the one who directed the cover-up. After that, another shocking revelation was made, that all conversations in the Oval Office were secretly recorded. These recordings became undeniable evidence, showing the president's direct role in the scandal. In that situation, Nixon tried every means to resist, including firing the special prosecutor, in the event known as the Saturday Night Massacre, but that only caused him to lose more political support. By August 1974, when the Supreme Court ruled to hand over the tapes, and the House of Representatives was preparing impeachment, Nixon was on August 8, 1974, he announced his resignation, becoming the first and only U.S. president in history to leave office mid-term due to political human radiation experiments. In 1945, just after the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, the Washington administration simultaneously launched a series of talks to understand how nuclear radiation affects humans. But instead of just conducting laboratory research, the scientists went further by directly injecting plutonium into real human bodies. Within 2 years, 18 people became test subjects, including patients undergoing treatment, children unaware of what was happening, and even homeless people who had no voice to protect themselves. Among them was the case of a construction worker in Tennessee who, after a light fracture accident, was deliberately kept under treatment for weeks to inject plutonium and monitor the effects of a radioactive substance on. Throughout that time, he lived in a weakened state and eventually died 8 years later. After this incident, the scope of research not only did not stop but expanded further. Prisoners in detention camps, elderly people in care facilities, even soldiers in the military, all became subjects exposed to radiation without being consulted. Ironically, in 1947, the Washington administration issued a set of humanitarian principles in medical research aiming to condemn the inhumane experiments that Nazi Germany had conducted during World War II. Yet they themselves were doing similar things and trying to keep it hidden to avoid responsibility. Everything that happened afterward was concealed for several decades. The public knew nothing about these experiments until 1994. When the U.S. Department of Energy launched a comprehensive investigation during the period from 1944 to 1974, only then was the whole truth brought to light, allowing the public to see clearly one of the darkest and most shameful chapters in the medical research history of the land of the Kua Tui Nam Kua Kua Nam Kua, the conspiracy to blame Cuba. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but the truth is that during the 1960s, the CIA actually considered terrorist actions targeting American citizens to create a pretext against Fidel Castro's Cuban government. Indeed, this is not a rumor but has been confirmed by a historical document, codenamed Operation Northwood, with content that would astonish anyone who reads it. In the plan, American planners proposed a series of scenarios, from bold to reckless. They considered organizing fake attacks on American territory, staging terrorist events to sow panic among the public. There was even a specific proposal to sink a ship near a port, and then hold fake funerals for the victims, or more dangerously, to blow up an American ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. However, President Kennedy completely rejected this plan. He recognized the dangerous and inhumane nature of these proposals, while understanding that approval would push America into an ethical quagmire that would be difficult to justify. This decision in some aspects saved America from becoming victims of deceitful campaigns created by their own government. Nevertheless, the mere existence of the Northwood Memo proves that, at that time, a portion of American security and military leadership was willing to manipulate public opinion, exploit, and place political military interests above ethics and human rights. For decades, Operation Northwood was carefully kept in the Pentagon's secret files. It wasn't until the 1990s when the U.S. Congress pressured for declassification of numerous Cold War documents, particularly during the investigation into President Kennedy's, that these documents were first brought to light. Following the regime change in Iran, in 1953, Iran experienced a historical turning point when Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was overthrown. He was famous for his decision to nationalize the oil and to end the dominance of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, although his actions received widespread support from the people. For affirming national sovereignty, they threatened Western economic and geopolitical interests. In this context, the CIA coordinated with British intelligence MI6 to deploy Operation Ajax with sophisticated activities from funding protests, spreading anti-Mossadegh propaganda to supporting military officers loyal to Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. After several preparations, on August 19, 1953, Mossadegh was deposed and the Shah returned to power, with direct support from the US and Britain. The American side once considered this coup a strategic in the early Cold War period, and it became a model for similar actions. As in Guatemala in 1954, they supported the overthrow of democratically elected President Jacobo Arbenz, leading to a 40-year civil war that killed approximately 245,000 people. For decades, Washington and London continuously denied their role. While Iranian public opinion and international historians persistently accuse them of being behind this, however, the truth began to emerge after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. When Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy, they disclosed many secret documents, providing evidence that forced the Washington administration to see. By 2000, U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright first acknowledged Washington's significance in the coup, and in 2009, President Barack Obama described the CIA's activities that led to the overthrow of a democratically elected. A greater turning point occurred in 2013, when the CIA was forced to declassify them, confirming that Operation Ajax was the result of coordination. Later, the agency even admitted on a podcast that the 1953 coup was an undemocratic action, but an exception among secret operations allegedly aimed at protecting elected government. Although many documents have been published, the full truth about Ajax remains incorrect, as some records were altered or destroyed since the 1960s. After more than 7 decades, the 1953 coup remains a deep historical wound for Iran, while leaving lasting consequences in the hearts of the people, sowing discontent and suspicion about relations with Western powers. And these are the secrets that America doesn't want the world to know. Hello, and see you again in the next videos.